Hey everybody, TacticAngel here, back on the PlayStation 4 to take a look at another premium ship in World of Warships Legends. Today we'll be looking at the Kutuzov, the Tier 7 Russian, or Soviet, cruiser. As usual, we'll be starting out with some history, move into my thoughts on the ship, the commander you'll probably want to use, then we'll run down all of the stats, and finish off finally with some gameplay. So while I usually like to start out with some history, there actually isn't that much that I could find that is remarkable about this ship, aside from the fact that it still exists as a museum ship that can be visited in Novorossiysk, Russia, to this day. If there is anything that I've missed, go ahead and put that information down in the comment section, and I will make sure to pin the best bit of info that anybody has available. In any case, laid down in February 1951, she was launched on November 1952 and commissioned into service in February 1954. She was the 12th of the Sverdlov-class cruisers, one of the last of the traditional or classic cruiser classes ever built. And what that means is that she would rely primarily on her guns for offense and direct fire AA for her personal defense. She was named after Mikhail Kutuzov, a Russian field marshal and aristocrat who served the Romanov dynasty. And though you might think that would make him somewhat diminished in popularity in socialist Russia, he did preside over the defense of Russia against Napoleon. He also got shot twice in the head and lived, which kind of makes him a total boss. If the Kutuzov had found its way into service during World War II with a suitably competent commander and crew, she would have been a fairly impressive light cruiser. However, by the time that the Sverdlov-class cruisers were deployed, they were nearly obsolete, with the Boston-class guided missile cruisers entering service just a year after the Kutuzov. Not to be dissuaded though, the USSR kept these ships in service for quite a long time. Kutuzov herself even outlived the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics itself, and was retired in 2000. As mentioned above, existing as a museum ship today, she is the last surviving example of her class. As far as how the Kutuzov performs in-game, she is a long-range HE spammer. She also is gifted with precisely enough armor in exactly the right places to make sure that she can really take a whole lot of damage if played incorrectly. Armed with 12 long-range 152mm cannons, the smart money on how to play this is to boost your range as much as possible and try to rain fire down upon your enemies. This is made especially effective by the Equilibrium of Power ability, which increases the penetration of high explosive rounds for a relatively small reduction in HE shell damage. The penalty, naturally, lessening the higher level you have this particular ability. You can do some pretty scary damage in the Kutuzov, and given the right opportunity, she burns ships from range, where return fire is likely to be ineffective or impossible. That said, this does come with some drawbacks, because the need to keep at range to remain effective, also sometimes referred to as alive, means that this ship has a very passive playstyle in general, that will often put you at the mercy of your team to spot for you, and you to remain at absurdly long range to ensure that returning fire is ineffective. Close up, the limited maneuverability and disastrous armor scheme is going to leave you at a disadvantage. In full disclosure, I do intend to earn this ship, but I don't particularly care for it based on its almost required playstyle, because as you may well be aware, I enjoy being fairly aggressive in my playstyle. I find that even ships like the Atago, though it shouldn't be on paper, more capable in closer ranges, and other cruisers do not have significant range disadvantages when compared to the Kutuzov. When I found playing this at a distance, you do find yourself as more support for your team, doing a pretty significant amount of damage, but not necessarily helping your team win. As a brief note to people who are doubtlessly going to find playing against the Kutuzov annoying, this does say that it has good ballistics, but if you find yourself being shot by one of these at extreme range, there's going to be about 10 seconds of flight time, so even a moderate amount of active maneuvering, changing of heading and speed, can greatly diminish the effectiveness of the Kutuzov. With the Russian commanders having just come out, I might ask for a bit of grace in terms of my commander setup. I actually tried this ship with both cruiser captains and no less than 6 different choices for secondary inspiration. The game that you will see later today is this particular build, one that I think would actually be better by switching fully packed for refill station. But otherwise, it works out pretty well. In terms of my second favorite inspiration, in my second slot, where you see I have von Mueller here, it's actually Philip Vine, mostly because at the distances that we're talking about, even a little dispersion probably helps, and this ship is noticeably sluggish in a turn, which makes active maneuvering somewhat difficult. So as I run down these stats, I will be comparing the Kutuzov, but I will be doing so on the base stats without a commander versus other tier 7 cruisers, since I do not yet have the Chapayev. Most specifically, I will be looking at the Kutuzov against the Atago, the Charles Martel, and the Chapayev, at least on paper. As usual, we start with survivability. You are looking at over 40,000 hit points, which is above average for tier 7 cruisers, but a little bit less than you'd be looking at in a Baltimore. The armor protection here is listed at 16 to 175 millimeters. That is actually fairly similar to what you'd be looking at on the Chapayev, and a little bit more actually than you find on other ships like the Charles Martel or Atago. The funny thing that I find about this is it actually does trap a lot of shots inside of your hull, meaning that you do take a lot of damage if you start taking penetrating hits. When we look at artillery, you are looking at 4x3 152mm guns, ranging out to a base range of 16 kilometers. The base rate of fire is actually 8 seconds. This is with the artillery reload mod, and these stats are very similar to what you'd be looking at on the Chapayev. Chapayev's turrets do traverse at about the same speed, and the one difference here really is that the Chapayev just does 100 extra damage on both AP and HE shell damage. Versus other HE spammers in the game, the 12% that you enjoy here on your fire chance is equal to the Chapayev, and it's lower than what you're going to see on things like the Charles Martel or the Atago. The thing is, you do have more guns than any of those heavy cruisers, and you do get to shoot around twice as fast. Now, one thing you should keep in mind with everyone saying this has incredible range, it's actually not significantly further than any of the other tier 7 cruisers in the game. For the most part, your advantage is less than 1/2 a kilometer. As we look at torpedoes, you do have one quintuple launcher on each side, which launch 533mm torpedoes out to a range of 8 kilometers. That's actually very good as far as Russian torpedo ranges go. However, the truth of the matter is you will probably not use these all that often. Among the other HE spammers at high tier, this is a better arrangement than the Chapayev, but truthfully, you're probably going to use the torpedoes on both of these Russian cruisers, mostly to gauge speed and heading, rather than actually to shoot angry fish at your opponents. In terms of maneuverability, you can make 34 knots. Your turning circle is not exactly incredible. It's a little on the wider side. And the 5.2 second rudder shift that you see here, which is modified by the steering gears modification I have in slot 2. This doesn't look that bad on paper. That said, it does feel pretty sluggish in the water. When we get into concealment, this is really not a Russian strong suit. The ship ought to be a little less visible than the Chapayev with similar camo, but it's more visible than pretty much everything else that isn't a battleship. And even then, probably more visible than some battleships. I think the general philosophy here is that most people aren't looking to reduce concealment on these high-tier Russian cruisers, instead looking to buff the distance between their maximum gun range and the range where they can be detected normally, and just choosing to fight further back. Where we look at consumables, you do have a smokescreen, which is worth noting since there aren't that many light cruisers that have a smokescreen that aren't British, and you come with hydro. What that means is you do not have a heel and you do not have radar. two advantages that the Chapayev will have over the Kutuzov. So let's just jump into some gameplay. We're going to be on two brothers. And as we start out with this battle, what I'm going to do is actually try to increase the distance that my ship has from enemy players. I'm going to do that by driving forward and turning out as opposed to backing up. And generally speaking, you can see that huge detectability ring around my cruiser. I need to probably get the edge of that ring behind the back of that island. I'll just point it out on the map. And then I'll probably be in a much better position to not get immediately spotted without wanting to be. And there you can see somebody's got the new Monarch. I should have my review out for that shortly. The Monarch ought to be reasonably susceptible to this sort of HE damage. Obviously you can see when we're firing at targets that are this far away, you're looking at just a really long hang time. You can say it has good ballistics, but anything firing this far away is going to have quite a bit of an arc, and it's going to give them plenty of time to possibly maneuver out of where I'm actually shooting. Looks like we have another HE spammer out there, the Belfast. Belfast not incredibly well armored, and certainly one of the real reasons where you benefit from this equilibrium of power ability is actually shooting at the Belfast's sister ship, the Edinburgh, because of course the Edinburgh has 30 millimeters of armor pretty much everywhere, and that ability boosts your penetration from 24 to 31 millimeters. In any case, as you can see, he is smoked up and now we're maneuvering behind this island. This island actually wouldn't be a bad place for me to stop and try to take advantage by shooting over. I am probably far enough away from it that I can make it through the center portion between the two field goals there. But alas, I am not going to do that. This is actually a somewhat more aggressive position than you probably want to take more often than not. I struggle to play this ship just because I do like to get up in people's faces. I do like to push flanks. And this isn't really ideal for either one of those things. Belfast is probably going to start backing up. A good thing for me to do here would be to check that with my torpedoes. They will tell me exactly what direction they're going. Obviously, if I can see the wake, like on the back of that Belfast, who's doing something I don't fully understand, then obviously I know exactly where he's going. Rather than try to judge how quickly he's going to speed up, I'm going to start shooting at this Gneisenau because it's kind of everyone's national pastime picking on German ships, because there's a lot of territory that these shells can penetrate, and of course German ships don't seem to have very good fire resistance. The equilibrium of power here is actually helping me penetrate the front and rear decks, I believe, or certainly portions of the front and rear of the hull. Now, thankfully, we do have a lot of shots going out with every one of these volleys, which means that we are at least scoring some hits with pretty much all of the better aimed salvos. Certainly a stationary target like that Monarch is going to be relatively easy to hit. Unfortunately, we didn't walk away with anything interesting there. So we switch back to the Gneisenau. As our smoke screen is starting to end, I want to start putting some steam out there so that I can turn around here in a second. I do not want to push further forward because I will be probably one of the only things a lot of those people over there can shoot. Here you see I'm just testing out to see what happens if I shoot AP. It can work, and certainly against Gneisenau broadside there, I'm hitting mostly superstructure. You see I'm aiming just a little high. Still, he has put out the flames, so we want to get that free damage going again. We start shooting the HE. Unfortunately, we've done a silly thing that you might find yourself doing quite a bit. I've hit that white line, commonly referred to as the Jean Barriere. It is put in the game to make sure that French battleships don't accidentally leave the game. Unfortunately, it also has killed my speed, and alright. This is even worse than hitting an island. But islands are another thing you need to pay attention to when you're floating around in the backfield, trying to dodge shots as much as you physically can. I feel like we're just about to end this tribulation. And hopefully our engines will begin working again. I don't know if they want me to just back up. But I don't like backing up. It's probably the better option here. So obviously the gameplay here is pretty straightforward. Sit far enough away that the enemy has better things to do than to shoot at you. Contribute to your team's damage by just continuing to shoot people with HE. You can make AP work, and certainly at cruisers within about 8 kilometers, definitely within 6 kilometers, these guns can tear through hulls pretty easily. And I would suggest that, except for like shooting at the front of either Chapayev or Edinburgh, because of course those both have thick 30mm bows, and you will bounce all of your shots. And wouldn't you know it, lit another fire. Yeah, not a whole lot there. But I'm swinging back towards the base because obviously it looks like we don't have a lot of people standing between the enemy and our base, and it would be a shame to lose by capture. We are ahead just by the one ship, which isn't really much of an advantage. So we want to make sure to safeguard that. So we've helped right there. Obviously, we're spreading our shots all over the place. We did manage to lead that Belfast just enough to hit him. I was starting to think, maybe I didn't kill him, and I was there. And of course, we have Scharnhorst. Scharnhorst can be bounced. Also, you can take a lot of damage from a Scharnhorst too. So, I'd really love to see the armor model for this particular ship. My sense is that the 175 is in some sort of very weird place and very limited place. Just because of how easy it is to get dev-striked in this. And though it hasn't happened to me yet, it has come very, very close to happening to me several times. And this particular sort of play that I'm making here, moving back towards the base, is one of the reasons why I actually use von Mueller as an inspiration a lot. This ship doesn't feel that fast, and anything you can do, particularly since you are going to be playing further away, I feel like it's a pretty decent choice to have this. to make sure you don't get outrun by another cruiser, and also to make sure that you can actually get back into a position where you can help your team and not just float around by the Jean Barriere the entire game. Putting some shells out there on that King George V. Ought to have just about the same amount of success as I had with the Monarch. And I'm not specifically trying to run away here. I'm just trying to make sure that only one of them can see me at any particular time. And I didn't want to jump out between those two islands. That would have put me at a really awkward angle if the King George V started to suddenly shoot AP. Honestly, it probably wouldn't have been great for me if he started to shoot HE either, because I'm fairly certain that would tear this ship up too. Now, he has found other things to shoot at, so we are once again exploiting him. And somebody has left a lovely smoke screen up here, which I feel like I might try to occupy as well. That will probably show off one of the weaknesses of this, which is, if nobody spots for you, then in a lot of cases you end up not being able to see anything. Now, thankfully, that didn't take very long before the Scharnhorst presented himself again as a target. And of course you can see just how well these shells typically perform against German battleships. Pretty annoying. Definitely start a lot of fires with them. And you see some of those salvos are 3,000 point salvos. And you're doing that, in this case, around every 7 seconds. One more fire and that guy is definitely toast. And there we finally get it. Now he will burn to death. I have activated in the meantime one of my smoke screens to keep myself out of the limelight again. But as this final minute's ticking down, I'm thinking we should probably go see if we can't do anything about that King George V. But I'm not going to waste too much of your time. We'll put this into fast forward because he just runs away. Overall thoughts on the Kutuzov. I don't find this to be particularly engaging to play. Most of the time, if you want to do a lot of damage, you do have to play it like this. I do have a replay where I tried to play it up close and personal. That is fairly interesting, and I was actually using Makarov as the captain. In any case, that's neither here nor there. I would suggest not specifically using Makarov just because you need that range, and Kuznetsov is going to get you a lot more in that department. So here you see our stats. Obviously, we did walk away with the victory there, doing 137,000 damage in mostly fire, I'm assuming. We walk away with a high caliber, not uncommon in this ship. There you see us on the top of the charts, and here is the economics of the ship. Overall, I expect this to be a little bit weaker than the Chapayev, probably a little bit less fun to play. I personally would have preferred to have a heal over a smoke screen, but that's just how I play. In any case, I hope you have found this to be useful. I'll see you guys on the next one.